Hello, I'm X2Cat and welcome back to a second channel video. Today I have some more Geography of Toy Cat for you all. This is a second channel series about geography that's actually been quite a few weeks since I've done one of these, and the reason for that, in case you are curious, is part of it's been that I've been really busy. You know, the main channel is kind of what I do here on YouTube. That's been taking up a lot of my time recently, but the other reason is that I was in Sweden for a week this past week, and if you think about it, that's kind of like doing geography, but in real life and going and experiencing it. Also, isn't Scandinavia just the best? But no, in more serious terms, I want to talk about the other side of Europe, because Scandinavia is the rich side of Europe. You know, Sweden, Norway, Denmark have some of the highest GDP per capita in Europe, but when I was in Ukraine recently, one of the statistics I heard a whole bunch was that it was the second poorest country in Europe. And obviously when you hear a statistic like that, you have to think, what's the extreme? What's the poorest country in Europe? And it's a country I hadn't heard of much at the time, but I've done a whole bunch of research into recently, and it is Moldova. So yeah, Moldova's a country that, based on the fact that I hadn't really heard of it, is one that you might not know about, but today I'll be telling you about a whole bunch of interesting things about it, because it is one of those countries that sadly does have a past that's mostly being beaten up by various different sides. You know, history was very cruel to Moldova, and let's talk about some of the interesting facts about a country that is, you know, the poorest one in Europe, which is an interesting place to be a poor country. So yeah, I'll be talking about that. Hopefully you'll do enjoy it. If you do, that's great. Let's get straight into it. So let's start by talking about the fact that a lot of the a lot of European citizens, especially Romanians, will see Moldova as kind of being a breakaway region of Romania. This is because you know, for the longest time they were united. They actually were together for quite a bit of time, and this is because most Romanians see Moldovans as being part of them, but a lot of Moldovans don't see it the other way around. So even though the majority of Romanians would be fine with joining in with Moldova, the majority of Moldovans aren't on board the other way around, which is kind of one of those interesting relationships where it's like, come on, let me love you, and they're like, I'm not too sure about this. You know, they're a hesitant girlfriend, and therefore they're doing their own separate thing. Interestingly though, even though Moldova is kind of their own separate thing to Romania, and at some point they might join, there's the whole technical second issue of Transnistria. So I'll talk about this more later, because it's one of those really interesting points of the country, but basically everything past this river here, you can see there's dashed lines on it, is part of a region called Transnistria. Tiraspol was the capital over here, and basically it's its own separate but not really country, and it basically means that if you want to visit Moldova, you're going to run into a whole bunch of problems, because one, Transnistria is, if it was its own country officially, it would be even poorer than Moldova, but because of that, it's one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, and also, because it doesn't officially exist, if you get a border stamp from them and try to go into Moldova, it looks like you're entering the country illegally, and basically, point being, if you try to get to Moldova from that side, it's going to be tricky. So yeah, Romania has a little country on the side there, and then the little country Moldova on the side has Transnistria. So yeah, with that said, that's just kind of a key point before we get into the history of this country. So what's the deal with Moldova? Why does it exist there between loads of big giant countries, and why is it landlocked? Because it gets so close to having like access to the sea over here. It gets so close, but not just. It is a landlocked country, no sea access at all. So yeah, let's talk about Moldova and kind of the history of it, and like I said, how it got kind of beat up over time, because it used to be part of the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottomans are from like the 1800s. You can go way further back than that, but we'll try and keep things simple here. Then they were kind of ceded to Russia and the Russian Empire, and they stayed part of the Russian Empire for a while until Russia turned it into an SSR when that whole socialist revolution thing happened, and then they tried to go independent, and they were for a bit, and then they kind of failed at independence. And then during World War II, Romania kind of invaded, because that's part of what Germany wanted them to do, and then on the other half of World War II, Russia came and invaded all of Europe again, and they became Moldovan SSR for the whole of the Cold War, which was 45 years ago, until the 1990s, when they gained independence and they became Moldova. So yeah, this country has only existed for 26 years, but that last 45 years during the Cold War is where things got a bit messy. So you probably know, if you might have heard, if you don't, that Stalin was kind of he liked playing around with, you know, countries and their nationalities and stuff, for a whole bunch of different reasons. That's why, if you look at the borders here, it's just a mess. But one of the things he did with Moldova is to stop them from wanting to rejoin with Romania, because it was a very popular sentiment at the time, and Romania wasn't an SSR, whereas Moldova was. They did a whole bunch of different changes. They made a sense of Moldovan nationality. They made Moldovan, which is, it's Romanian. Their language is Romanian. They made it written in a different script, the Cyrillic script, I believe, the Russian one instead of the one that Romanians use. Basically, they changed a whole bunch of, they basically made a nationality from the Moldovans, and that is why, to this day, Moldovans aren't too comfortable with the idea of going back into Romania. So yeah, there's your brief history of Moldova. It's a poor country that kind of switched hands a whole bunch, but that doesn't really entirely explain, you know, how it's so poor. So, to kind of put this in perspective as to, like, how poor Moldova is, and I feel like I'm picking on someone here, but I'm assuming no one from Moldova is watching this, and if you are, I'm just going to share some numbers here, because here's the GDP of Moldova versus Ukraine. Ukraine is the second poorest country in Europe. It's known, it's known as being that like kind of ex-Soviet thing. It's literally half of Ukraine's, and again, Ukraine is the second worst in Europe and very, very low compared to most countries. And to put that in perspective, so $2,200 a year at its lowest in 2000, it was $321 a year per person. That's GDP per person. Basically, to compare that to like Poland, a country you might think is poor, it's more like 13,000, and even at its lowest, it's like 5,000. And if you compare that to a country like the US, it's something like 30,000. So literally something like 1% of the US's purchase power, or like 0.5% of like Norway something. Basically, yeah. Point being here, Moldova, pretty poor. And again, if it feels like it's like picking on the kid over there that's like, oh yeah, there's just not much money there. And one of the really interesting side effects of Moldova being a very poor country, because it's mostly kind of farming based, there's not too much industry until, the independence thing, and now they're all about services and taking money from abroad. Because even though Moldova has officially 3.5 million people living there, that number has been going down slowly. Like it's only been going down, it's not been going up, like a lot of countries in Eastern Europe. But the really interesting thing about it is, of those 3.5 million people, around 25 to 30% of their population isn't expected to actually live there. They're expected to be illegally working overseas, because something like 26% of that, entire Moldovan economy, which admittedly isn't too much, does just come from overseas workers working illegally, taking the money back. Or, they could be doing it legally too, but it's mostly illegally. So yeah, Moldova is a country with not many people, with not much money, but the people don't live there, and the money doesn't come from that, which is it's pretty crazy to think about. So anyway, yeah. So Moldova, like I said, it's not doing too great as a country. It's in kind of an awkward place. And what's the future for the country? What are they planning to make it all good and happy and stuff? So the thing about Moldova is, again, even though by the way, a couple more things I did want to share here actually. First of all, here's the Moldovan flag versus the here it is. Here's the Moldovan flag versus the Romanian flag. It's literally the same flag, but with the coat of arms on it. And second of all, one of the big problems with having a country like Moldova is and Transnistria is they're both very corrupt, and there's lots of problems. And the biggest one, this is the story that alerted me to it like a long time ago, is the fact that something like 12% of their GDP just went missing. Like literally, there was a robbery. I don't know. Don't tell me to install Flash. There was a robbery, and $1 billion, which again represents 12% of their entire economy, just went missing, which had to be bailed out by the taxpayers. It was a whole mess, and that's one of the reasons there's a lot of kind of uncertainty there. So yeah, Moldova, not doing too great. But what about the future? What's the future of this country? I've kind of been bashing on the country. What's going on there? Also, in case you are like, so what does the poorest country look like? Let's do some Street View stuff. Because what you might expect is, like, when you go into the street, you find something that's like a street that looks like this, and you're like, oh, it looks kind of normal. Because even though it is the poorest country in Europe, again, it doesn't look as bad as you might expect if you look around the whole place. But one of the things that I find really interesting is the fact that even though, I don't know, whenever you picture ex-Soviet, you picture like this weird tint being on the place, it actually does have a bunch of beautiful places around there. So for instance, if we like, I don't know, go over here for instance, you can see, oh, look, it's beautiful. Because that's how nature works. It doesn't need to have a rich country to have nature. Anyway though, to move back onto the final point here, what is the future of Moldova and its beauty and its stuff and its breakaway regions? So the thing about Moldova is, like a lot of other European countries, they want to be part of the European Union. The European Union is kind of a way into any of the other countries in there, which let's not talk about the UK now, but like any of the other countries in there, you can move from them, you can trade with them, and it's basically a very good positive if you're in a slightly poorer country like this. However, because they have the big issue of their breakaway region, Transnistria, they're likely not going to be able to join the European Union. So, however, there is a little loophole. If Moldova does decide to rejoin Romania, they can take on their Romanian citizenship, and because Romanian citizenship, I'm so bad at saying that word, Romanian citizenship is EU citizenship, if Moldova decides to rejoin with Romania, they would officially all become Romanians, and they would all become EU citizens. So although they can't officially ever join through by themselves, because they've got so many different issues, plus being the poorest country in Europe, they can join unofficially through Romania, and that's why I think, even though the majority of Moldovans don't want it on principle, because the whole Stalinist thing, as time goes on, I think it'll become a more and more accepted idea, and what my prediction here is that Moldova won't exist as a country in 50 years, assuming the EU continues to exist and thrives, which is, coming more and more into question recently. But yeah, there's your little geography with Toycat talking about Moldova. This was a little bit of a different episode. Let me know what you thought. As always, I think it's just cool to talk about countries. Do you want me to pick a country and just talk about that again? Like, I could be like, hey, do you guys know about Belarus? Look at that border of Lithuania. Isn't that wacky? Let me know with the comments. That's what they're there for. Oh yeah, okay. I think I already mentioned this, but yeah, going from Romania into Ukraine and then back again is like a mess because you have to make sure you don't go through Transnistria. Just a little fun fact there. But yeah, hope you did all enjoy this video on this internet. If you did, comments. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Bye.